He laughed when she hesitated over the pen, the sound echoing too loudly in the glass-walled conference room. "Take your time," Marcus Hale said, leaning back like he owned the moment. To him, Elena Ward was a quiet wife who had fallen behind his world, small, replaceable. What he didn't know was that the woman across from him wasn't just signing divorce papers. She was the hidden force behind the money that built his career, and the moment she signed, she stopped protecting him. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 6 hours earlier, Marcus still believed he was the one in control. The conference room sat high above Midtown Manhattan, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected a gray, overcast sky. Rain streaked the windows in thin lines, turning the city into something distant and abstract. Inside, everything was precise, clean, expensive. Marcus Hale adjusted his cufflinks as if the meeting were just another deal closing. His suit was custom. His watch understated, but expensive enough that anyone who mattered would recognize it. He carried himself like a man who had earned his place. Across from him, Elena sat quietly. She wore a simple charcoal dress, no designer logo, no jewelry beyond a thin band on her finger. Her hair was pulled back loosely, as if she hadn't tried too hard. In Marcus's world, that read as lack of effort, lack of awareness, lack of value. The attorney cleared his throat, glancing between them. "Mr. Hale, Ms. Ward, I just want to confirm that both parties understand the terms outlined in these divorce papers." Marcus didn't look at Elena. "We understand," he said quickly. "Let's not drag this out." The lawyer nodded but didn't move on immediately. His eyes lingered on Elena for half a second longer than necessary, as if waiting for something. A reaction. A protest. She gave him nothing. "I'm required to note," the attorney continued carefully, "that the prenuptial agreement you both signed 3 years ago limits any claim to shared assets. Ms. Ward, you are choosing to waive any additional financial considerations beyond the agreed settlement." Marcus let out a quiet scoff, which is generous, by the way. Elena didn't look at him. Her gaze remained on the papers. The lawyer shifted slightly. "Ms. Ward, are you comfortable proceeding under those terms?" "Yes," she said. Her voice was calm. Not weak, not emotional, just steady. It unsettled him more than he expected. Marcus leaned forward, tapping the edge of the document with one finger. "Let's be honest here," he said. "This is more than fair. 50,000. You walk away clean, no complications, still nothing from her." The silence stretched just a little too long. Marcus felt the need to fill it. "You don't have to worry about anything after this," he added, his tone sharper now. "You can figure out whatever it is you want to do next." Elena finally lifted her eyes to meet his. There was no anger there, no pleading, no humiliation, just clarity. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough to make something tighten in his chest. Then she looked back down. The lawyer shifted again, this time more noticeably. "Ms. Ward," he said, more carefully, "once these documents are signed and filed, the agreement becomes legally binding. There will be no revision unless both parties consent." "I understand," she said. Marcus leaned back again, exhaling through his nose. "Good, then let's move forward." He checked his phone briefly, his attention already drifting. A message lit up from Victoria Kane, running late. "Don't start without me tonight." A faint smile touched his lips. That was the life he was stepping into. Someone who understood the pace, the expectations, the world he was building. Not this. He glanced at Elena again, taking in the simplicity of her appearance, the quiet way she held herself. He remembered dinners where she said little. Events she declined to attend. Conversations she never seemed to fully engage in. At some point, he had stopped trying to include her. At some point, he had decided she didn't belong. "You always looked uncomfortable around people who matter," he said suddenly, the words slipping out before he considered them. "This is better for both of us." The lawyer frowned slightly, but said nothing. Elena didn't respond. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the papers. Still, controlled. Marcus mistook that for resignation. "You'll be happier," he continued. "Less pressure, less expectation, still nothing." The silence began to irritate him. He tapped the pen against the table and pushed it toward her. "Go ahead," he said. "Let's finish this." Elena looked at the pen. For a brief moment, her fingers didn't move. Not hesitation. Calculation. The lawyer noticed. His eyes flicked to her again, something like curiosity forming beneath his professional composure. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Inside, the room felt too quiet. Elena picked up the pen. Her movements were unhurried, precise. As she positioned the tip over the signature line, Marcus leaned back again, already disengaging, already moving on. He didn't seize the subtle shift in the lawyer's posture. He didn't notice the way the man's gaze sharpened, as if he recognized something just out of reach. Elena signed her name in one smooth motion, no flourish, no pause, just certainty. She set the pen down. "There," Marcus said, exhaling as if a weight had lifted it. That wasn't so difficult. He reached for the papers immediately, pulling them closer like they were a contract closing in his favor. Elena stood. The movement drew the lawyer's attention first, then Marcus's. She adjusted her sleeve slightly, a small, controlled motion. For the first time, she looked directly at Marcus. "You should make sure everything is finalized today," she said. Her tone hadn't changed. Still calm, still even. But there was something underneath it now. Something final. Marcus frowned slightly. "That's the plan." She held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then she nodded once. No anger, no bitterness, no regret, just decision. The lawyer cleared his throat again, more quietly this time. "We'll file immediately," he said, though his eyes remained on Elena. "Processing shouldn't take long." She inclined her head slightly. "Thank you." Marcus was already gathering his things, his attention drifting back to his phone, his next meeting, his next life. He didn't notice when Elena stepped away from the table. He didn't notice the way the lawyer watched her leave, his expression no longer neutral, and he definitely didn't notice the brief vibration of her phone as she reached the door. A single message lit up the screen. "Board awaiting confirmation. Transition ready upon your signal." Elena paused for half a second. Then she slipped the phone back into her bag without responding. Behind her, Marcus laughed softly at something on his screen, completely unaware. She opened the door and walked out, and for the first time since the papers had been placed in front of her, there was no one in that room who truly understood what had just been set in motion. Marcus didn't look up when Elena walked out of the conference room. The door clicked shut behind her with a quiet finality that didn't match what had just happened. To him, it was just another step, another decision. Something efficient, necessary, overdue. He tapped his phone again, rereading Victoria's message, running late. "Don't start without me tonight." A faint smile returned. That was the world he belonged to now. Fast-moving, strategic, elevated. People who understood momentum. Not Elena. The lawyer gathered the signed divorce papers carefully, aligning the edges as if the precision mattered. "I'll have these filed within the hour," he said. "Good," Marcus replied without looking up. "The sooner this is done, the better." There was a pause. "Mr. Hale," the lawyer said, his tone measured. "Just to be clear, once this is processed, the prenup remains fully enforceable. There's no claim to shared investments, equity, or future earnings from either side." Marcus finally glanced up. That was the point. "Yes," the lawyer said slowly. "Of course." But something in his expression didn't quite match agreement. Marcus noticed it, irritation flickering. "Is there a problem?" "No," the lawyer said quickly. "Just confirming everything is understood." Marcus leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "It is." He stood, adjusting his jacket. The meeting was over in his mind, finished. Clean. As he reached for the door, the lawyer spoke again, quieter this time. "She didn't ask for anything," he said. Marcus paused just enough to register the comment. "And that's uncommon," the lawyer added. Marcus let out a short breath, almost amused. Not everyone plays the same game. He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, already dismissing the conversation. Behind him, the lawyer remained seated for a moment longer, staring at the signed documents as if they carried weight beyond ink and paper. Marcus didn't care. The elevator ride down was silent, smooth, predictable. Just like everything else in his life lately. When the doors opened into the lobby, the city greeted him with muted noise, footsteps, distant traffic, the hum of people moving with purpose. He checked his reflection briefly in the mirrored panel near the exit. Everything in place, everything controlled, Exactly how it should be. Outside, the rain had eased into a fine mist, the kind that didn't ruin a suit, but lingered just enough to blur the edges of the city. Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk and pulled his phone out again. He dialed quickly. Victoria picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said, her voice smooth, confident. "It's done," Marcus replied, a beat of silence, then a soft laugh. "That fast?" "She didn't fight it," he said, "signed everything." "Of course she didn't," Victoria said lightly. "That's what people like her do. They settle." Marcus glanced up at the skyline, feeling something close to satisfaction settle in his chest. "Exactly. You're free now," she said. "I was all ready," he replied, though the words felt better. Spoken out loud, Victoria hummed thoughtfully. "Come by tonight. There are a few people I want you to meet." "Investors?" Marcus asked. "Potentially," she said. "Let's just say people who can take you further than where you are now." Marcus smiled. "That's the plan." He ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. For the first time in a long time, everything felt aligned. Clean break. Clear direction. No distractions. No compromises. He didn't notice the black sedan idling across the street. Inside, a man in his 50s watched the building entrance with quiet focus. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable. A phone rested in his hand, screen dim but active. "Confirmed," he said into it after a moment. "She's out." A pause. "Yes," he continued. "Papers are signed." He listened, nodding once. "I'll proceed as instructed." He ended the call and remained still, eyes tracking Elena as she emerged from the building. She didn't look around, didn't hesitate, didn't appear lost or uncertain. She simply stepped into the city like she belonged to something beyond it. The man watched her for another second, then reached forward and started the engine. Across the street, Marcus had already disappeared into the flow of traffic, unaware of anything beyond his own trajectory. Elena walked 2 blocks before stopping under the narrow overhang of a closed storefront. The mist clung lightly to her hair, softening the edges of her reflection in the darkened glass. For a moment, she stood still, not frozen, not overwhelmed, just still. Her phone buzzed again. She took it out this time, bored awaiting confirmation. "Transitioned ready upon your signal." The message hadn't changed. The timing had. Elena stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than before. Then she typed, "Proceed with Phase 1. Hold external communications until formal notice." She hit send, no hesitation, no second thoughts. The response came almost immediately, understood. She slipped the phone back into her bag and stepped away from the glass, her reflection fading behind her. The city moved on around her. Cars, people, noise. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Marcus arrived at the office 40 minutes later, the energy in the building exactly as he expected. Controlled chaos. Analysts moving quickly. Phones ringing. Screens flashing data. He walked through it like he owned it. "Morning, Marcus," someone called. "Morning," he replied, barely slowing. His assistant, Daniel, caught up with him near the elevator. "Hey, quick heads up," he said. "The Sterling call got moved up. They want to finalize the expansion numbers today." Marcus nodded. "Good, we're ready." Daniel hesitated. "Also, there's been some delay on the funding side." Marcus frowned slightly. "What kind of delay?" "Not sure yet," Daniel said. "Just that the external partner hasn't signed off." Marcus waved it off. "They always take their time." "Yeah," Daniel said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Just thought you should know." Marcus stepped into the elevator, dismissing the concern as the doors closed. Funding partners delayed things all the time. It was part of the process, nothing unusual, nothing serious. Upstairs, the conference room was already filling. Screens lit up with projections, numbers, growth models. Marcus stepped in, confident, composed, ready to lead. "All right," he said, taking his place at the head of the table. "Let's get started." The presentation began. Metrics, expansion strategy, revenue projections. Everything lined up, everything made sense. Until it didn't. Halfway through the call, one of the senior partners on the video feed leaned forward. "We're still waiting on final approval," he said. "Yeah?" Marcus nodded. "We've submitted everything required." "Yes," the man replied. "But the decision isn't ours." Marcus frowned slightly. "Then whose is it?" A brief silence. The partner exchanged a look with someone off-screen before answering. "The controlling party hasn't signed yet." Marcus felt a flicker of irritation. Who exactly is the controlling party? The partner hesitated again. as if choosing his words carefully. It's handled through a private structure, he said. We don't have direct visibility. Marcus leaned back slightly, his expression tightening. That's not how this works. It is in this case, the partner replied. The room shifted. Subtle but noticeable. Marcus glanced around, sensing the change in energy. The confidence he had walked in with didn't quite fit anymore. Then find out who we need to talk to, he said, sharper now. We don't stall deals over invisible approvals. We're trying, the partner said, but access is limited. Marcus exhaled slowly, controlling the irritation building under his skin, then escalated. We already have, the man replied. Another pause, and we were told to wait. The call ended shortly after that. Not resolved, not moving forward, just stalled. Marcus stood there for a moment, staring at the blank screen. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. Daniel shifted beside him. You think something changed? Marcus shook his head. No, it's just process. But even as he said it, something felt off. Not wrong, just out of reach. He grabbed his phone, already dialing Victoria. She picked up quickly. Hey, we've got a delay, he said. Funding approval. There was a brief silence on her end. Longer than expected, she asked. That's them, Marcus said. They won't say. Another pause. Then, softer, more measured, that's unusual. Marcus frowned. You ever heard of something like this? Victoria hesitated again. Only when the money isn't what it seems, she said finally. Marcus stilled slightly. What does that mean? It means, she replied carefully, someone else is calling the shots. Someone above the people you're dealing with. Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. Then we find them. Yes, she said. You do. The line went quiet. For the first time that day, Marcus didn't feel in control. Across the city, Elena stepped into a private elevator, her reflection sharp again in the mirrored walls. Her phone buzzed once more. Phase 1 initiated. Awaiting your next directive. She didn't respond. Not yet. She watched the numbers rise, her expression unreadable, and somewhere, just beneath the surface of everything Marcus believed about his world, something had already begun to shift. Marcus didn't like uncertainty. It wasn't fear exactly. It was irritation. A disruption in a system he believed he understood. Something small but persistent, like a loose thread you couldn't ignore. By late afternoon, the delay in the funding approval had started to spread through the office. People weren't panicking, not yet, but the tone had shifted. Voices were quieter, conversations shorter. Emails were being read before being sent. Marcus stood at the glass wall of his office, looking down at the trading floor. Everything looked the same from above. Structured, controlled, but he could feel it. Something was off. Daniel knocked once and stepped in without waiting. You've got a minute? Marcus didn't turn. If it's about the delay, I already know. It's not just a delay, Daniel said. That made Marcus turn. What does that mean? Daniel closed the door behind him. I made a few calls. Quiet ones, people I trust. Marcus crossed his arms. And they've never seen this group stall like this, Daniel said. Not on a deal this size. Not this late in the process. Marcus frowned. They're private. They move slow. Daniel shook his head. No, they move deliberately. That's different. The distinction landed, even if Marcus didn't want it to. Then something changed, Marcus said. Yeah, Daniel replied. That's what I'm saying. Marcus walked back to his desk, picking up a pen, then setting it down again without thinking. Did you get a name? Daniel hesitated. Not directly. Indirectly? Marcus pressed. They're calling it a layered structure, Daniel said. Shelf entities, holding companies. Everything routes through a central authority that doesn't show up on paper. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's standard. Not like this, Daniel said. This one, it's controlled, tightly. Like there's one decision point. Marcus looked at him. There's always a decision point. Yeah, Daniel said quietly. But usually we know where it is. Silence stretched between them. Marcus didn't like that silence. Keep digging, he said finally. I want a name. Daniel nodded, but didn't move right away. There's something else. Marcus's patience thinned. What? Daniel pulled out his phone and tapped the screen, then turned it so Marcus could see. An email. Short, formal. No branding. Subject approval status, pending review. Marcus scanned it quickly. This is nothing, he said. Look at the sender, Daniel replied. Marcus's eyes shifted. The address wasn't a corporate domain. No company name. No identifiable structure. Just a string of characters. Encrypted. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. So what? It's internal routing. Or it's someone who doesn't want to be found, Daniel said. Marcus handed the phone back. We're not chasing ghosts. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket. Just telling you what I'm seeing. Marcus didn't respond. Daniel lingered for a second longer, then nodded once and left the room. Marcus stood there, staring at nothing in particular. He told himself it was nothing. Process delay. Temporary. But the certainty he'd had that morning felt thinner. He picked up his phone again and dialed Victoria. This time, she didn't answer right away. When she did, her tone was different, less playful, more focused. Hey, she said. You hear anything? Marcus asked. A little, she replied. Nothing confirmed. Marcus leaned against his desk. Then tell me what you do have. There was a pause. I've been asking around about the group behind your funding, she said. Not the front-facing entities. The real structure. And people don't talk about them, she said. Not because they don't know, because Marcus frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does if the people involved are powerful enough, she said. Marcus pushed off the desk, pacing slowly. You think they're pulling out? No, Victoria said. If they were, you'd already know. Then what? Another pause. They're waiting, she said. For what? Marcus asked. Victoria exhaled softly. That's the part no one can answer. Marcus stopped pacing. Waiting. For what? The question lingered, heavier than it should have been. You're overthinking it, he said finally. It's a delay. Maybe, she replied. But she didn't sound convinced. Marcus ended the call shortly after, more unsettled than he wanted to admit. Across the city, Elena stepped out of the elevator into a quiet, private floor that overlooked the Hudson. The space was minimal, clean, no logos, no obvious branding. Power didn't need decoration here. A man stood near the windows, his posture straight, his expression composed. Late 50s, sharp suit, the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. He turned as she approached. Ms. Ward, he said, his voice respectful but not overly formal. Elena, she corrected gently. Of course, he said, nodding. Everything is in motion. She walked past him, setting her bag down on the table without hesitation. Report. Phase 1 has been initiated across all active channels, he said. Approvals are being held at the final stage, exactly as instructed. Elena nodded once. Any resistance? Minimal, he said. Some internal inquiries. Nothing that compromises the structure. She moved to the window, looking out over the river. The city stretched endlessly beyond it, unaware of the quiet shifts happening inside it. And Marcus Hale, she asked. The man glanced briefly at a tablet in his hand, experiencing initial disruption. No awareness of source. Good, she said. There was no satisfaction in her voice. Just confirmation. He's pushing for escalation, the man added. Elena turned slightly. Of course he is. Do you want us to intervene? No, she said immediately. Not yet. The man inclined his head. Understood. She walked back to the table, picking up a folder that had been left there for her. Inside, documents, structures, approvals, names that didn't appear anywhere public. Her eyes moved over them quickly, efficiently. He'll try to identify the decision point, the man said. He won't find it, Elena replied. Not without help, he agreed. Elena closed the folder. That's the point, she said. Back at the office, Marcus sat in his chair, staring at the same numbers that had looked perfect that morning. They still made sense. But they didn't feel secure anymore. He opened his email again, rereading the message Daniel had shown him. Approval status, pending review, no name, no signature, no trace. Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly. Who was holding his deal hostage? And why? He opened a new message window and began typing, addressing it to the general contact they had for the funding group. We require immediate clarification on approval status. Delays at this stage are unacceptable. Please provide direct contact for final authorization. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then hit send. Across the city, Elena's phone buzzed softly on the table. She glanced at the screen. The message appeared. Her eyes moved over it once. Then she set the phone down again without replying. The man across from her watched quietly. Do you want to respond? He asked. Elena shook her head. Not yet, she said. Outside, the city continued to move, unaware of the invisible line being drawn. Back in his office, Marcus waited. Minutes passed, then more. No reply. For the first time since the divorce, since the clean break, Since the certainty he had carried into that conference room, Marcus Hale felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not fear, but the beginning of doubt. And somewhere in that silence, without realizing it, he had just handed control to someone he still believed didn't exist. Marcus didn't go home that night. Instead, he went straight to Victoria's penthouse. The building stood on the Upper East Side, quiet and guarded, the kind of place where no one asked questions because everyone already knew the answers didn't belong to them. The doorman nodded the moment Marcus stepped out of the car, recognizing him without hesitation now. That hadn't been the case a few months ago. Back then, Marcus had waited in the lobby once, checking his watch while Victoria finished a meeting upstairs. He had noticed the way the staff treated him, polite but neutral. Not important. Now, the nod came faster. The elevator was held open. Things had changed. Or at least, he believed they had. Victoria opened the door herself before he could knock. She was dressed for the evening already. Black dress, clean lines, minimal jewelry. Everything about her looked deliberate, controlled. "Rough day?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. "Complicated," Marcus said. She closed the door behind him, studying his face for a second, longer than necessary. "You don't like not having answers." "No one does," he replied. "That's not true," she said lightly. "Some people build entire empires on unanswered questions." Marcus ignored that. He walked further into the apartment, his eyes scanning the space, floor-to-ceiling windows, soft lighting, art that didn't need explanation. This was the world he had chosen, the world Elena had never fit into. "You said there were people you wanted me to meet," he said. Victoria moved toward the bar, pouring 2 glasses without asking. "There are, but before that, we need to talk about your deal." Marcus took the glass, his grip firmer than usual. "I already told you. It's a delay." She shook her head slightly. "It's not just a delay," Marcus exhaled. "You're starting to sound like Daniel." "And Daniel isn't wrong," she replied. That made him pause. Victoria leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. "I made another call after we spoke earlier." Marcus waited. "The group behind your funding," she continued. "I found someone who's worked adjacent to them. Not directly, but close enough to understand how they operate." "And?" Marcus asked. "They don't hesitate," she said. "They don't stall. When they hold something, it's intentional." Marcus set his glass down harder than he meant to. "Intentional for what? That's the problem," she said. "No one knows." Marcus laughed once, short and sharp. "That's not an answer." "No," Victoria said. "It's not, but it's the only one you're going to get right now." The silence stretched between them. Marcus walked to the window, staring out at the city. The lights blurred slightly against the glass, distorted by the lingering moisture in the air. "I built that deal," he said after a moment. "Every part of it. They don't just get to sit on it without explanation." Victoria didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was softer. "Are you sure you built it?" Marcus turned. "What is that supposed to mean?" She held his gaze. "You're good, Marcus. I wouldn't be here if you weren't." "But deals like this? Structures like that? They don't exist in a vacuum." He took a step toward her. "Say what you're trying to say." "I'm saying," she replied carefully, "there's always someone higher." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we find them." Victoria studied him for a second, then nodded slowly. "All right." She crossed the room, picking up her phone. "There's dinner tonight. Private. A few people connected to the kind of capital you're dealing with." "Investors?" Marcus asked. "Gatekeepers," she said. That word sat differently. Marcus grabbed his jacket. "Then let's go." The restaurant was discreet. No signage, no obvious entrance from the street. Just a narrow door tucked between 2 older buildings, guarded more by silence than security. Inside, everything was low-lit and controlled. People spoke quietly, not because they had to, but because they didn't need to raise their voices to be heard. Victoria led him to a table near the back. 2 men were already seated, both older, both composed in a way Marcus recognized immediately. Not flashy, not performative. Real power rarely was. "Marcus," Victoria said smoothly, "this is Richard Cole." "And Daniel Reeves." Marcus shook hands, reading them quickly. Both firm, both measured, no wasted energy. They sat. Drinks were ordered, small talk exchanged. But it didn't last long. Richard leaned forward slightly. "Victoria tells us you're dealing with a structural delay." Marcus nodded. "Temporary." Richard's lips curved faintly. Nothing is temporary at that level. Marcus didn't like the implication. It's a funding approval issue. Daniel Reeves spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the table easily. With which entity? Marcus hesitated. That annoyed him. We don't have a direct name, he said. It's layered. Richard and Daniel exchanged a brief glance. Not surprised. That was worse. You're dealing with a central authority structure, Richard said. Single point control, hidden behind multiple shells. Marcus leaned back slightly. That's what we've been told. Daniel nodded once. Then you're not negotiating with a group. Then who? Marcus asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up his glass, took a slow sip, and set it down again. A person, he said finally. The word landed heavier than expected. Marcus frowned. That's not how these structures work. It is when someone wants absolute control, Richard replied. Marcus's irritation flared. Then, give me a name. Richard shook his head slightly, ugly. If we had one, you wouldn't be asking. Victoria watched the exchange carefully, her expression unreadable. Marcus leaned forward, his tone sharper now. So what exactly am I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for some invisible authority to decide my future? Daniel's gaze didn't shift. If you push too hard, you risk being cut out entirely. Marcus scoffed. For my own deal? Richard's expression didn't change. You'd be surprised how often that happens. Silence settled over the table. For the first time that evening, Marcus felt something shift beneath him. Not collapse. Not yet, but instability. Victoria reached for her glass, her fingers steady. So the play is patience? Richard glanced at her. The play is understanding who you're dealing with before you make your next move. Marcus leaned back again, frustration building under his skin. And how exactly do I do that without access? Daniel's eyes held his for a second longer than necessary. You wait, he said. Marcus didn't like that answer. Not even a little. Across the city, Elena sat alone, in the quiet office overlooking the river. The folder from earlier lay open in front of her. Updated reports had already come in. Delays confirmed. Internal pressure rising. External inquiries increasing. Everything was moving exactly as expected. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from the board. It was from a number she hadn't saved, but recognized anyway. She stared at it for a moment before answering. Yes, she said. A voice responded on the other end. Calm. Professional. He's escalating, the man said. I know, Elena replied. He started to Uskins outside in his usual channels. Elena leaned back slightly in her chair. And he's getting close to the right structure, the voice said. Not the name, but the shape. Elena closed the folder slowly. That's fine, she said. A pause. Do you want us to intervene? The man asked. No, Elena said again. Not yet. She ended the call and set the phone down. For a moment, she just sat there, still, composed. Then she reached for another document. This one thinner, simpler. A list of approvals. At the bottom, one line remained unsigned. She picked up a pen. Back at the restaurant, Marcus stared at the table, his mind running through possibilities faster than he could organize them. A person, a single point of control. Invisible, untouchable. He didn't like it, didn't trust it, and more than anything, didn't understand it. He looked up at Victoria. We're not waiting. Her eyes met his. Then what are you doing? Marcus's jaw set. We force movement, he said. Pressure the structure. Find the cracks. Richard exhaled quietly. Be careful. Marcus didn't respond, because for the first time in a long time he felt like something was instinct between him and the future he had already decided was his, and he wasn't going to wait for permission to take it. Across the city, Elena lowered the pen. The final line remained unsigned. For now, her phone lit up again. A new message. Board requests confirmation for emergency review session. She stared at it for a second, then typed, schedule it immediately. The emergency board session was scheduled for 7:00 a.m. Marcus didn't know that. All he knew was that by the next morning, the delay had turned into something else entirely. A hold, not official, not announced, but real. He felt it the moment he stepped into the office. No one said it out loud, but the energy had shifted again. Sharper this time, more focused, less patient. Daniel was already waiting outside his office when Marcus arrived, holding a tablet instead of his usual notebook. That was fast, Marcus said, dropping his keys onto the desk. Daniel didn't smile. We have a situation. Marcus stilled slightly, defined situation. Daniel stepped in, closing the door behind him. The funding group didn't just delay approval. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Then what did they do? They froze the allocation window, Daniel said. Marcus stared at him. That's not possible. It is, Daniel replied, and it just happened. Marcus moved around the desk, grabbing the tablet from Daniel's hand. The screen displayed a notice, internal, not public. Temporary suspension of capital deployment pending strategic review. No explanation, no timeline. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. That's a stall tactic, he said. They'll release it once. They don't use stall tactics, Daniel cut in quietly. Marcus looked up sharply. They've never frozen capital mid-cycle, Daniel continued. Not unless they're reassessing the entire structure. Marcus's jaw clenched. Over what? Daniel hesitated. That's what we don't know. Marcus handed the tablet back, his mind already racing. Set up a call. I want direct contact. We've tried, Daniel said. They're not responding. Marcus's voice dropped, then escalate higher. Daniel's expression didn't change. There is no higher contact. The words hit harder than Marcus expected. No higher contact. That didn't make sense. There was always someone. Always a layer above. Always a name. Marcus turned away, running a hand through his hair. Then find someone who knows someone. I don't care how. Daniel nodded, but didn't move. There's something else. Marcus didn't turn this time. What? Daniel tapped the tablet again, pulling up another document. This came in 10 minutes ago, he said. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. It wasn't addressed to him. It wasn't even addressed to the company. It was a notice, formal, precise, and unmistakably legal in tone. Request for internal audit alignment. All prior approvals subject to retrospective review under controlling authority guidelines. Marcus frowned. What is this? Daniel swallowed slightly. It means they're reviewing everything. Everything? Marcus repeated. Every decision tied to their capital, Daniel said, including yours. Marcus turned fully now. That's standard compliance, he said quickly. Routine. Marcus's irritation flared. Say it. Daniel met his eyes. It's not routine. Silence settled. Marcus felt it again. That shift, that subtle loss of control. He grabbed his phone, dialing Victoria without thinking. She answered on the first ring this time. I was about to call you, she said. Tell me you've heard something, Marcus replied. I have, she said, and you're not going to like it. Marcus paced once across the room. Try me, eh? They've initiated a review, she said. I know that, Marcus snapped. Why? Another pause. Because someone told them to, she said. Marcus stopped. That's not how this works. It is if the person giving the order controls the structure, Victoria replied. Marcus felt a flicker of something sharper now. Not irritation, not confusion. Pressure. Then we find that person, he said. Victoria exhaled softly. Marcus. What? He pushed. You're still thinking like this is a negotiation, she said. It's not. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Then what is it? It's a decision, she said, and it's already been made. The words hung there. Marcus didn't like them, didn't accept them. Nothing's final until it's signed, he said. On the other end, Victoria didn't argue. But she didn't agree either. Across the city, Elena sat at the head of a long table in a room that had no windows. It wasn't meant to. No distractions. No external noise. Just clarity. Around her, 6 people sat in silence. All older. All composed. The kind of individuals who had spent decades operating in spaces where influence didn't need to be announced. No one spoke until she did. The freeze has been implemented, one of them said, sliding a document across the table. Elena glanced at it briefly. Status of internal reactions? Immediate, another voice replied. Pressure building across all dependent structures. Elena nodded once, expected. A man to her left leaned forward slightly. We can accelerate if necessary. Elena's gaze shifted to him. Not yet, she said. The room stilled again. Let him move, she continued. I want to see how far he pushes. No one asked who, they already knew. Another document was placed in front of her. Audit scope, names, decisions, approvals. Her eyes moved down the list. Marcus Hale appeared more than once. She didn't react. Any irregularities? She asked. Potential, the Slouch from her, said we'll need full authorization to access deeper layers. Elena's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the page. Authorization meant exposure, not hers. His. She picked up the pen again. Across the table no one moved. They were waiting, not for the decision. For the confirmation, Elena signed. Clean. Decisive. Proceed, she said. Back in his office, Marcus ended the call the tour with Victorious and stared at the wall for a long moment. A decision already made. He didn't believe that. He couldn't. Because if that were true, then he wasn't the one making it. He turned back to his desk, grabbing the audit notice again. Retrospective review, controlling authority. The words felt heavier now, less abstract, more directed. He opened his email, scrolling through old threads tied to the deal. Approvals, timelines, contacts. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He started digging deeper. Older emails, internal notes, attached documents. Some names repeated. Others didn't. Then something caught his attention. A signature line. Not obvious, not highlighted, but consistent, appearing across multiple approval documents. Not as the sender, not as the recipient, as the final clearance. Marcus leaned closer. The name wasn't fully visible. Masked initials only. EW. His mind didn't connect it. Not yet. It was just another layer, another piece of the structure, another detail to chase. But something about it didn't sit right. He leaned back slowly, staring at the screen. EW across the city. Elena placed the pen down. The documents were already being collected. The process had begun, irreversible now. One of the board members looked at her carefully. Once this moves forward, there's no clean rollback. Elena met his gaze. I'm not looking for one, she said. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. A new notification. Internal audit initiated. Subject. Hail, Marcus, priority review. She didn't pick it up immediately. Didn't need to. She already knew what it said. Instead, she stood. Prepare the next phase, she said. The room shifted as people moved into action. Quiet. Efficient. Final. Back in his office, Marcus stared at the initials again, EW. For a brief second, something flickered at the edge of recognition. Something familiar. Then it was gone. He shook it off, grabbing his phone again. Daniel, he said as soon as the line connected. I want every approval document tied to this deal. Every version, every signature. There was a pause. Then Daniel replied, slower this time. You might want to come see this yourself. Marcus didn't ask why. He was already moving. Because somewhere between the delay, the silence, and the invisible authority pulling strings he couldn't see, Marcus Hale was starting to realize something. He wasn't just being stalled. He was being watched. Marcus didn't slow down as he crossed the trading floor. People moved out of his way instinctively. Some glanced up, some didn't. But the energy followed him now. Not admiration, attention. Daniel was waiting near one of the internal conference rooms, tablet already in hand. His posture was tighter than usual. You're going to want to sit down for this, Daniel said. Marcus didn't. Just show me. Daniel hesitated for half a second, then pushed the door open. Inside, the room was already set up, screens active, files open. A cluster of documents spread across the table like evidence in a case no one wanted to admit they were building. Marcus stepped in slowly. What am I looking at? He asked. Daniel moved to the main screen and tapped once. A series of documents appeared. Approval logs, internal memos, structured layers of the deal Marcus had been leading for months. At first glance, everything checks out, Daniel said. Standard approvals. Marcus crossed his arms. That's what I said. Daniel nodded. Look closer. He zoomed in on one section. Marcus leaned forward. There it was again. EW. Same initials. Same placement. Final clearance. Every time. Marcus's eyes flicked to the next document, and the next, and the next. Different dates. Different structures. Same pattern. Same initials. His jaw tightened. What is this? Daniel exhaled slowly. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Marcus straightened slightly. It's a compliance officer. Internal authority. Daniel shook his head. No compliance officer signs across multiple shell entity like this. Not at this level. Marcus didn't respond. Because now that he was looking, really looking, it didn't feel routine. It felt deliberate. Where does it route? Marcus asked. Daniel pulled up another screen. That's the problem. It doesn't route anywhere we can access. Marcus's irritation flared again. Everything routes somewhere. Not if it's controlled privately, Daniel replied. Marcus stepped closer to the table, flipping through the printed copies now. Each told the single free. Approvals, layers. And then, EW final. No signature beyond that. No name. No title. Just control. Marcus's mind started connecting dots. Not cleanly. Not logically. But something was there. Pull everything tied to those initials, he said. I already tried, Aniel replied. Nothing comes up in any official registry. Marcus let out a sharp breath. Then it's not official. Daniel didn't answer. Marcus looked up. Say it. Daniel hesitated, then spoke carefully. It's higher than official. Silence. Marcus didn't like that, didn't accept it. But he couldn't ignore it anymore either. He reached for one of the documents again, staring at the initials like they were going to rearrange themselves into something he understood. E.W. Why did that feel familiar? Across the city, Elena stood in front of a wall of glass, the river stretching out below her like a quiet boundary between two worlds. Behind her, the room moved. People spoke in low tones, files were exchanged, decisions carried out without hesitation. The audit had already begun. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't turn. Update, she said. The man from earlier stepped forward. Initial reactions are escalating. Internal leadership is beginning to push back. Expected, Elena replied. They're trying to identify the controlling authority, he added. Elena's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Recognition. Let them try, she said. They've found the pattern, the man continued. The initials. Elena didn't move. That was inevitable, she said. Do you want us to mask further activity? He asked. No, she replied. That made him pause. Elena, he said carefully. If they connect it, her tone wasn't defensive, it was certain, because the truth wasn't just hidden, it was dismissed, and that was stronger than any firewall. Back in the conference room, Marcus dropped the document onto the table. Set up a meeting, he said. Daniel blinked. With who? Marcus looked at the screen again. E.W. Whoever this is, he said. They're the key. Daniel hesitated. We don't have a contact. Then we create one, Marcus snapped. How? Daniel asked. Marcus's mind was already moving. Pressure. Escalation. Force the structure to respond. Said. Fine. We push from the other side. Daniel frowned. Meaning? We trigger external exposure, Marcus replied. Force them to engage. Daniel's expression tightened. That's risky, Marcus turned sharply. So is sitting here doing nothing. That's not what I'm saying, Daniel said. I'm saying if this is who we think it is, Marcus cut him off. We don't know who it is. Daniel held his gaze. Exactly. The room I went felt again. That resistance, not from the deal, from the people around him. Doubt. He hated that. We're not backing down, Marcus said, his voice lower now. Controlled. Not on this. Daniel didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. All right, he said after a moment. What do you need? Marcus glanced at the documents one more time. E.W. Everything tied to these approvals, he said. Every communication, every layer. Daniel nodded slowly. Marcus didn't wait for more. He walked out of the room, his mind already pushing forward. If there was a gatekeeper, he would find them. Across the city, Elena finally turned from the window. The room quieted instantly. Prepare the next phase, she said. The man beside her nodded. We're ready. She walked back to the table, picking up another file. This one different, thinner, more direct. External pressure is beginning, the man added. Elena flipped the file open. Marcus Hale, detailed, every move, every decision, every risk he had taken believing he was untouchable. He's pushing, the man said. Elena's eyes moved across the page. Yes, she said softly. He always does. There was no anger in her voice, no resentment, just understanding. Because she had seen it before, in him, in others. Ambition without awareness, confidence without foundation. Schley closed the file. Let him, she said. The man hesitated. And if he escalates further... Elena picked up her phone. He will, she replied. She opened a message. Thread. Marcus's earlier email still sat there, unanswered, demanding, patient, impatient, she typed slowly this time. Not a full response. Just one line. Then she paused. Read it again, and hit send. Back at his office, Marcus was halfway through another set of documents when his phone buzzed. He ignored it at first, focused, locked in. Then it buzzed again. Same notification. He grabbed it this time, irritation already building. The message wasn't from Daniel, or Victoria, or anyone he recognized. Unknown sender. He opened it. One line. Your request for direct contact has been received. Marcus stilled. Finally, something. He read the message again. Short, controlled, no signature, no name. His jaw tightened slightly. About time, he muttered. Then his eyes moved to the bottom of the screen. There was a second line. Smaller, almost like an afterthought. Final authorization requires in-person verification. Marcus's pulse shifted. In-person. Good. That meant access. That meant control. He didn't hesitate. He started typing immediately. Name the time and place. He hit send. Across the city, Elena's phone lit up. She read the reply, then set it down without responding. The man beside her glanced at the screen briefly. He's taking the bait, he said. Elena didn't answer right away. She walked back to the window, looked out at the city, then spoke. Schedule the meeting, she said. The man nodded, understood. A pause. Elena, do you want to attend personally? She didn't turn. Yes, she said. Behind her, the room shifted again, because for the first time since the divorce, the line between Marcus Hale's world and hers was about to disappear. Marcus didn't sleep. Not really. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling while his mind replayed the same fragments over and over again. E.W. Final authorization. In-person verification, someone controlling everything from above. He had built his career on knowing where power sat in a room, and now for the first time he had no idea where to look. By morning, that uncertainty had turned into something sharper. Determination. If there was a gatekeeper, he would meet them. If there was a decision-maker, he would face them. Because that was how this world worked. Or at least, how he believed it worked. At 8:12 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up immediately. Location has been sent, the voice said. Calm, neutral, no inflection. Time, Marcus asked. Tonight, 7:30. A pause. Be on time, the voice added. The line disconnected. No introduction, no confirmation. Marcus stared at the phone for a second, then opened the message that followed. An address. Downtown, private. No company name attached. Of course. He exhaled slowly. Finally. Across the city, Elena stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve with practiced precision. No assistants hovered. No stylists fussed. She didn't need them. Everything about her was deliberate already. The woman in the reflection didn't look like the one Marcus had dismissed across a conference table. That version had been smaller, softer, contained. This one wasn't. There was no hesitation in her posture now. No need to be overlooked. Her phone rested on the table behind her, screen lit with a quiet stream of updates. Logistics confirmed. Security cleared. Meeting secured. She didn't check them again. Instead, she turned away from the mirror and picked up a thin folder. Inside, just a few pages. Marcus Hale. Condensed. Precise. His strengths. His blind spots. The way he pushed when challenged. The way he underestimated what he couldn't see. She closed the folder without reading further. She already knew. Back at the office, Marcus moved faster than usual. Everything felt compressed now. Focused. Daniel caught up with him near the elevator again. You got something? Marcus didn't slow. Meeting tonight. Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. That was quick. Too quick, Marcus replied. Daniel hesitated. You trust it? Marcus pressed the elevator button. I don't have to trust it. I just have to show up. Daniel nodded slowly. You want backup? Marcus glanced at him briefly. For a conversation, Daniel didn't answer right away. Just be careful, he said finally. Marcus stepped into the elevator as the doors opened. I always am. The doors closed. Daniel stood there for a moment longer, watching the numbers climb. He didn't look convinced. The location was exactly what Marcus expected, and nothing like it at all. The building itself was unremarkable from the outside. Older. Clean. No signage, no visible branding. But inside it was different. Controlled. Quiet in a way that wasn't empty. The kind of quiet that meant everything had already been decided before you arrived. Marcus stepped through the entrance, his gaze sweeping the space automatically. No receptionist, no waiting area. Just a man standing near a hallway, dressed simply, posture straight. Marcus Hale, the man said. Not a question. Marcus nodded once. That's right, this way, no introductions. Marcus followed. The hallway was narrow, then opened into a larger room. Minimal, one table, two chairs, no windows. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second before stepping in, fully. Have a seat, the man said. Marcus didn't sit immediately. He scanned the room again. No cameras visible, no documents, no identifiers, just control. He took the seat anyway. The man left without another word. The door closed behind him. Marcus leaned back slightly, forcing himself into calm. This was negotiation. It always was. Time passed, not long, but long enough to test patience. Marcus didn't move, didn't reach for his phone, didn't show the restlessness building underneath. Then the door opened. He looked up. And for a split second, nothing made sense. Because the person who stepped into the room didn't belong in this setting. Not according to everything Marcus believed. Elena walked in without hesitation. The door closed behind her. Followed. Marcus stared. Not shock, not yet. Just confusion. His mind tried to place it. Wrong building, wrong room, wrong context. Elena, he said. The name coming out slower than expected. She didn't react to the surprise. Didn't explain. She simply walked to the other side of the table and took the seat across from him. The same place she had sat days ago. But this time, nothing about it felt the same. Marcus frowned slightly. What are you doing here? Elena met his gaze calmly. You asked for direct contact. The words landed, but they didn't connect. Marcus let out a short breath, shaking his head once. No. I asked to meet the controlling authority behind the funding structure. Elena didn't blink. That's why I'm here, she said. Silence. Marcus stared at her, waiting for the rest. For the explanation, for the correction. It didn't come. His expression hardened slightly. This isn't funny. Elena's voice didn't change. I'm not joking. Marcus leaned forward now, irritation rising. Then explain it. She didn't rush, didn't react to the tone. You've been looking for the final authorization point, she said. The one holding your deal. Marcus's jaw tightened. Yes, that's me, Elena said. The room didn't move, the air didn't shift, but something inside Marcus did. He stared at her. Really looked this time, not the version he had dismissed, not the one he had categorized, the one sitting in front of him now, calm, composed, unshaken. That doesn't make sense, he said. Elena tilted her head slightly. Why not? Marcus let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Because you don't have anything to do with this. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into the folder she had brought and slid a single document across the table. Marcus looked down. Approval structure, layers, entities. And at the bottom, final authorization. His eyes flicked back up to her. No, that wasn't possible. You're not, he started, then stopped. Because the initials, he had seen them over and over again. Elena's gaze didn't waver. You've been reading my approvals all morning. The words hit clean, precise. Marcus felt something tightened in his chest. Not panic, not yet, but something closer. You're saying you've been signing off on my deals, he asked. Elena didn't correct him. Yes, she said. The simplicity of it made it worse. Marcus leaned back slowly, trying to process it. No, he said after a second. That's not, no, that doesn't track. Elena watched him, patient. Not defensive, because she didn't need to convince him. The structure already had. You thought the funding came from a group, she said. It doesn't. It comes from a controlled network. Marcus shook his head slightly. And you're telling me you control it? Yes. One word. No hesitation. No explanation. Marcus let out a breath, running a hand over his face. This is... He stopped again, because he didn't have a word for it. Impossible. Didn't fit. Because the evidence was sitting in front of him. But you, he started, then stopped again. Because every version of Elena he had built in his mind, none of them fit this. Elena leaned forward slightly now. Say it, she said. Marcus looked at her. You were at home, he said. You didn't what? She asked. Didn't operate at this level, he finished. There it was. The assumption, the belief, the reason he had signed those papers without hesitation. Elena held his gaze. I didn't operate where you could see me, she said. The difference landed harder than anything else. Marcus sat there, silent now, because for the first time, the structure he had trusted, the deal he had built, the control he believed he had, none of it was his, and across the table, the woman he had walked away from was the one who had been holding it all. Elena reached for the document again, sliding it back toward herself. This meeting, she said calmly, is your opportunity to understand what happens next. Marcus didn't move. Didn't speak, because he wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Not when the ground beneath him had just shifted. Elena studied him for a moment, then added, almost gently, You finally found the decision point, Marcus. A pause. And now you get to see what it decides. The room fell into silence again. But this time, Marcus understood exactly what he was sitting across from. And for the first time since this began, he didn't know if he was in control at all. The first sign that something was wrong appeared in the form of a calendar invitation. Marcus noticed it while reviewing the morning reports. A routine meeting had been moved. Then another, then a third. At first, he ignored it. Large deals changed schedules all the time. Investors asked questions. Lawyers requested revisions. Markets shifted. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the silence around it. People who usually answered within minutes suddenly needed approval before responding. Executives who once fought for his attention now sounded careful, almost distant. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the latest email on his screen. Pending additional review. 4 words. That was all. But he knew enough about business to understand what they meant. Someone had pressed pause, and no one wanted to tell him why. He leaned back in his chair, remembering Elena across the table the night before. Her calm voice, her complete lack of surprise. She hadn't acted like someone revealing a secret. She had acted like someone confirming a fact everyone else already knew. That bothered him more than anything, because Marcus had spent years believing he understood the world around him. He understood investors. He understood executives. He understood power. But he had never understood Elena, and now he was beginning to realize that was not because she was complicated. It was because he had never bothered to look. By noon, Marcus was already searching for answers. He called Daniel first. "Tell me what's happening with the expansion deal," Marcus said. Daniel paused before answering. "That depends on what you mean." Marcus frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the funding team requested another internal assessment." "Why?" "I wasn't told." Marcus tightened his grip around the phone. "You're the operations director. You should know." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I'm not the only person who should know." The sentence irritated Marcus, not because it was wrong, because it was true. For years, Marcus had built his reputation on being the person who had answers. Now he was discovering there were entire conversations happening above him. Conversations he had never been invited into. "Who requested the review?" Marcus asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he said the same entity that approved the original funding. Marcus went still. He already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. "EW." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't have to. Marcus ended the call. For the first time in years, he felt something he hated feeling: uncertainty. Across town, Elena sat in a quiet conference room with 3 senior advisors. No one raised their voice, no one rushed. That was the difference between people who chased power and people who actually had it. "Has Marcus been informed of the delay?" one advisor asked. Elena looked down at the documents in front of her. "Not directly." "Do you want him informed?" She considered the question, not because she didn't know the answer, because she wanted to be certain it came from the right place. "I want the process followed," she said. The advisor nodded. No celebration, no satisfaction, just business. That was important. Elena didn't want Marcus to lose because she was angry. She wanted the truth to catch up with him. There was a difference. His career had not been built on nothing. He was talented, intelligent, ambitious. But ambition without accountability created damage. And Marcus had spent years believing consequences were for other people. The review continued. Several decisions were examined. Several projections were questioned. Not because Elena wanted to punish him, because the company had a responsibility to protect the people connected to it, including the employees Marcus rarely noticed. The same employees who had stayed late fixing problems he created. The same people whose names never appeared in his presentations. That afternoon, Marcus received another message. The board wanted clarification, not from his team, from him. He stared at the screen. A board request was different from an investor request. Investors asked questions. Boards demanded answers. He walked into the executive conference room 10 minutes later. Victoria was already there. She looked composed, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm. The same way she always looked. Marcus noticed something, though. She wasn't surprised. "Did you know about this?" he asked. Victoria looked up. "About what?" "Don't do that." Her expression barely changed. "Marcus, the review, the funding delay, the board questions." Victoria placed her phone on the table. "Everyone is dealing with uncertainty right now." That's not an answer. She studied him. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw something behind her expression. Something closer to caution. "You need to be careful," she said. He frowned. "Careful?" Yes. With what? With assuming you know everything happening around you. The words bothered him, because they sounded familiar, almost like something Elena would say. Marcus stepped closer. What exactly are you saying? Victoria looked away briefly. I'm saying this industry changes quickly. That's not what you mean. She didn't answer, and that silence told him more than words could. Marcus walked out of the room feeling worse than before, because now there were two people who seemed to understand something he didn't. Elena and Victoria. That evening, he returned to his apartment later than usual. The place felt different now. Not because anything had changed, because he had. For years, he had looked around and seen proof of success. The expensive furniture, the carefully chosen artwork, the address, the lifestyle. He had believed he earned all of it, but now he wondered how much of his success had existed because someone else quietly allowed it. His phone rang. He expected another business call. Instead, it was his divorce attorney. Marcus, we need to discuss something. His stomach tightened. What happened? There has been an update regarding the settlement process. Marcus sat down. What update? A pause. The documents from Elena's side have been reviewed, and the attorney sounded unusually careful. There are questions about some of the financial disclosures. Marcus frowned. Questions? Yes. About what? Another pause. Then the attorney said, about whether Elena's reported assets represent her actual financial position. Marcus froze. The room became silent. What does that mean? It means, the attorney replied slowly, that we may have underestimated what she owns. Marcus stared ahead. For a moment, he couldn't process the sentence. Elena, the woman he had described as simple. The woman he believed needed protection. The woman he thought was walking away with nothing. His attorney continued. There may be additional information that changes the way this settlement is viewed. Marcus stood up. His heartbeat increased. Are you telling me she lied? No. The answer came immediately. She may have done the opposite. Marcus said nothing, because suddenly, the idea that terrified him most was not that Elena had hidden something. It was that she had never needed anything from him at all. The next morning, before sunrise, Marcus received an email. No subject line, no explanation, just an attachment. A corporate ownership document. His hands went still as he opened it. At the top was a name he recognized. A name connected to every major decision his company had made. A name he had ignored because he never thought it mattered. Then he saw the authorization line, and the signature underneath. Elena Ward. Marcus stared at the screen, because, for the first time, he wasn't wondering who Elena was. He was wondering how much of his life she'd been quite controlling, while he believed he was the one in charge. Marcus spent the next 2 days trying to convince himself that the document meant nothing. He told himself it was a misunderstanding, a legal structure, a technical issue, something created by wealthy families who liked keeping their finances complicated. It couldn't mean what his attorney had suggested. It couldn't mean Elena had been living beside him all these years while holding a position he never knew existed. Because if that was true, then Marcus had to face a reality he wasn't ready to accept. He had not underestimated Elena because she lacked intelligence. He had underestimated her because he never believed she could be more powerful than him. That thought bothered him more than the business problems. The funding delays could be fixed. The board questions could be answered. But the idea that his entire view of his marriage had been built on arrogance was much harder to accept. At the office, the atmosphere had changed. People still greeted him. They still smiled. But the respect felt different, more cautious. Like everyone knew something he didn't. Marcus hated that feeling. He had spent years becoming the person people came to for decisions. Now, he walked through his own company, wondering which conversations stopped when he entered the room. During a leadership meeting, he noticed something unusual. His name appeared on the presentation, but not as the person controlling the discussion, as the person responsible for answering questions. The difference was small. The meaning was not. Where are we with the investor review? Marcus asked. The financial director looked down at her notes. We are waiting for final approval. Marcus leaned forward. From who? The room became quiet. A few executives exchanged glances. Finally, the director answered. The investment group. Marcus forced a calm expression. Which representative? She hesitated. Then she said, the controlling office. That phrase stayed in the air. The controlling office. Not a bank, not a lender, not a partner, a controlling office. Marcus looked around the room. Nobody seemed surprised. That was the part that unsettled him. Everyone seemed to know. Everyone except him. After the meeting, Marcus stopped Daniel in the hallway. You knew. Daniel turned. Knew what about the investor structure? Daniel's expression changed slightly. Not guilt. More like disappointment. I knew there were people above us. Marcus lowered his voice. And you never thought to tell me? Daniel looked at him carefully. You never asked. The answer hit harder than Marcus expected. Because it was true. Marcus had never asked about the people behind the money. He only cared about the money itself. As long as the deals closed and the numbers looked good, he assumed he understood everything. He walked away without responding. For the first time, he wondered how many times Elena had tried to tell him things. How many conversations had he dismissed because he thought she had nothing valuable to add? The answer made him uncomfortable. Because he remembered the late nights when she reviewed documents with him, the questions she asked about risks, the comments she made about business decisions. He had laughed. He had told her she didn't understand the industry. He had called her opinions outside perspective. Now those same instincts were suddenly being treated as important, just not by him. Across the city, Elena received an invitation. Not from Marcus. Not from anyone connected to the divorce. It was from the organization that had spent years operating quietly behind the scenes. A private event. A gathering of investors, executives, and decision-makers. The kind of room Marcus had spent his career trying to enter. Elena read the invitation carefully. She knew what it represented. The moment when silence would become impossible. Her advisors had asked if she wanted to delay. She had refused. Not yet, one of them had said. There are still people who believe Marcus built everything alone. Elena looked out the window. That is exactly why the truth matters. She wasn't interested in humiliating him publicly. She didn't need applause. She had spent years protecting his reputation, even after he stopped protecting her feelings. But she also knew something important. Silence had protected Marcus for too long, and eventually, silence became permission. The event was scheduled for the following week. The invitation list included executives from major firms, investment leaders, and several people Marcus desperately wanted to impress. When Marcus heard about it, he saw it as an opportunity, a chance to repair his image, a chance to prove he was still important. Victoria encouraged him to attend. You need to be visible, she told him. Marcus looked at her. Do you know who will be there? Important people. That's not an answer. Victoria smiled slightly. You noticed something then. She was avoiding the question. Again. But Marcus pushed the feeling aside. He had spent too long chasing success to admit that the people around him might not be who he thought they were. Meanwhile, Elena prepared differently. She didn't choose an expensive dress to impress anyone. She didn't plan a dramatic entrance. She simply reviewed the information she already knew. The company reports, the investor history, the decisions Marcus had made, the damage he had caused. She wanted to remember one thing. She was not walking into that room as Marcus Hale's abandoned wife. She was walking in as herself. That distinction mattered. The night before the event, Marcus returned home and found a package waiting. He assumed it was another legal document. More divorce paperwork. More reminders that his marriage was ending. Instead, inside was a simple invitation. He recognized the name immediately. The private investment group. The one everyone in his industry respected. The one nobody could seem to reach directly. Marcus looked at the guest list attached. His confidence returned. This was his chance. If he could connect with the right people, he could recover everything, maybe even more. He didn't notice the small detail at the bottom, the name listed as the host. He was too focused on the opportunity ahead. The next evening, Marcus arrived early. He walked through the venue with confidence. Executives greeted him. Investors spoke politely. For the first time in days, he felt like he belonged again. Then someone approached him. A senior executive from the investment group. Marcus immediately extended his hand. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. The executive smiled. Mr. Hale. Marcus nodded. I've been hoping to discuss the future of our partnership. The executive's expression changed slightly. Not confusion. Recognition. We will discuss that soon. Marcus smiled. Excellent. The executive looked past at him toward the entrance. Then he stepped aside. The room slowly became quieter. Not because someone famous had arrived, because someone important had arrived. Marcus followed everyone's eyes. And then he saw her. Elena. Not the woman who sat quietly at home. Not the wife he had described as ordinary. She entered the room with calm confidence, surrounded not by people trying to impress her, but by people who respected her. Marcus stopped breathing for a moment, because everyone around him knew exactly who she was, and then the executive beside him spoke softly. Everyone has been waiting for Miss Ward's approval. Marcus stared. Miss Ward? The executive looked at him. Yes. A pause. The controlling air of Wardstone Capital. Marcus felt the room shift, because suddenly the woman he had trying to leave behind was standing in front of him, and everyone there understood something he had never even considered. Elena Ward had never been beneath him. She had been above him the entire time. Marcus stood frozen near the entrance of the ballroom, surrounded by people who had spent years trying to earn a place in this room. A few seconds earlier, he had believed he belonged among them. Now he wasn't sure he belonged anywhere. Elena moved through the crowd with quiet confidence. She didn't demand attention. She didn't need to. People naturally made space for her. Executives greeted her with respect. Investors listened when she spoke. Board members who had barely acknowledged Marcus in previous meetings approached Elena with careful consideration. Marcus watched every interaction, every handshake, every nod. Every person who looked at Elena like she was the person who mattered. Because she was. The realization felt impossible. He kept searching for an explanation that would make sense. Maybe she was connected to the company. Maybe she worked with the investors. Maybe there was some family relationship he didn't understand. But every possibility led back to the same truth. Elena had been hiding an entire world from him. And somehow he had never noticed. Marcus. He turned. Victoria stood beside him, her expression controlled. For once, she didn't look confident. You knew about this? He asked. Victoria frowned. About what? About Elena. The hesitation was brief. That was enough. You knew she had this kind of influence. Victoria looked away for a moment. I knew she wasn't as simple as you thought. The words irritated him, not because they defended Elena, because they confirmed what Marcus had refused to see. You could have told me. Victoria gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. Would you have listened? Marcus had no answer, because he knew exactly how he would have reacted. He would have dismissed it. He would have assumed Elena was exaggerating. He would have believed he understood the world better than she did. That was what hurt most. Not that Victoria knew, not that Elena had power. It was that he had spent years believing the woman beside him had nothing to teach him. Across the room, Elena spoke with one of the investment group's senior advisors. She noticed Marcus watching. For a moment, their eyes met. Marcus expected anger. A cold smile, some sign that she had been waiting for this moment. But Elena showed none of that. She simply looked calm. That made it worse. Because Marcus realized she had not brought him here to punish him. She had brought him here because the truth had reached the point where it could no longer stay hidden. Later that evening, Marcus finally approached her. The confidence he usually carried was gone. Elena, she turned. Marcus was polite, almost formal. That distance affected him more than he expected. They had spent years married, years sharing a home, years making decisions together. Yet standing in that room, he felt like he was meeting a stranger. You should have told me, he said. Elena looked at him. Told you what? He lowered his voice. Who you really were. A small silence followed. Then Elena answered. I was always who I was. Marcus looked comfortable. That's not what I mean, I know. Her calm response made him pause. So, I mean the company, the investments, the ownership. Elena nodded slightly. I kept those things separate. Why? The question came out sharper than he intended. Elena looked at him for a moment. Because when we met, you didn't know any of it. Marcus waited. And I wanted to know if you respected me without it. The words landed harder than he expected. Because suddenly he remembered the early years of their marriage. The times when Elena had lived simply despite having every reason not to. The times she chose ordinary restaurants. The times she refused expensive gifts. The times she encouraged him when his career was uncertain. She had given him the chance to love her as a person, and he had failed. Instead, he had slowly started measuring her value by what she contributed to his image. "You thought I was embarrassed by you," Marcus said quietly. Elena didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The silence answered for her. Marcus looked down, because he remembered every moment. The way he introduced her at company events. The way he avoided mentioning her background. The way he joked that she was not really a business person. He had turned the person who supported him into someone he wanted to hide. "I was wrong," he finally said. Elena's expression remained steady. "I know." That response surprised him. He expected forgiveness, or at least emotion. Instead, she simply accepted the truth. "I thought you would understand eventually," she continued, "but instead you became more focused on proving you belonged in a world you already had access to." Marcus swallowed. The sentence felt painfully accurate. Before he could respond, a group of executives approached Elena. "Miss Ward, the board members are ready." Marcus looked between them. Board members, ready. For Elena, not for him. He stepped back as she walked away. For the first time in years, he saw the difference between someone who wanted power and someone who already had it. Mark returned home that night, unable to sleep. His apartment felt unfamiliar, not because anything had changed, because he had changed. The same rooms, the same furniture, the same life. But the story he had been telling himself was gone. He opened his laptop and searched for information about Wardstone Capital. The results were overwhelming. The company had investments across industries, real estate, technology, healthcare, financial services. The name appeared everywhere, but never in a way that attracted unnecessary attention. Quiet power. That was Elena's world. Marcus kept scrolling. Then he found something that made him stop. A business article from years earlier. A major acquisition. One of the first deals that helped his own company expand. He remembered that deal. He remembered celebrating it. He remembered believing his strategy had changed everything. But the article mentioned the funding partner. Wardstone Capital. Marcus stared at the screen. His hands became still. The deal that built his reputation had been supported by Elena's family office. Not directly, not publicly, but enough. Enough to change everything. He thought back to all the times he had called himself self-made. The phrase suddenly felt different. Not because he had done nothing. He had worked hard. He had earned opportunities. But he had ignored the invisible support around him, especially the person who had supported him the most. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early. He expected things to return to normal. They didn't. A message was waiting in his inbox. A meeting request. From the board. The subject line was simple. Strategic review. Marcus opened it. The message explained that several recent decisions required evaluation. The investor group had requested a complete review of the company's direction, including Marcus's leadership decisions. His stomach tightened, because he finally understood. Elena wasn't just the person who could reveal his past mistakes. She was the person with the authority to examine them. And for the first time since he built his career, Marcus had no control over what happened next. Then another email arrived, shorter, more direct, from the investment group. It contained only one sentence. "The board has requested Ms. Ward's presence at the review meeting." Marcus had spent the previous night staring at the board review notice until the words stopped looking like words. Strategic review. 2 simple words. But they carried a meaning he understood now. This was no routine meeting. This was an evaluation, and for the first time in his professional life, Marcus Hale was not the person asking the questions. He was the person being examined. The meeting began at 9 in the morning. Marcus entered the conference room expecting tension. He did not expect silence. The executives who usually greeted him with confidence now avoided unnecessary forcing. Nobody was rude. Nobody challenged him openly. That almost made it worse. Because Marcus knew what it meant. People were waiting to see what happened next. At the end of the table sat several board members, and beside them was Elena. Not as his wife. Not as the woman he had dismissed. as the person with authority. Marcus took his seat across from her. For a moment he wanted to say something personal, something about their marriage, something about how unfair it felt to discover this side of her only now. But he stopped himself. This room was not about their relationship. It was about the decisions he had made. The chairman opened the meeting. "We are here to review the recent expansion strategy and several concerns raised by our investment partners." Marcus nodded. He knew what was coming. The first presentation showed financial projections. The second showed missed targets. The third showed risks. Numbers appeared on the screen. Numbers Marcus had once presented with confidence. Now they looked different, less like achievements, more like evidence. "We need to discuss the acquisition timeline," one board member said. The assumptions behind this deal were overly aggressive. Marcus leaned forward. The market conditions changed. Elena looked at the documents in front of her. "The market changed for everyone," she said calmly. "The question is why this company was less prepared than others." Her voice was not angry. That bothered Marcus more than anger would have. He had expected revenge. He had expected her to attack him. Instead, she was being professional, fair, and somehow that made him feel smaller, because he realized Elena did not need to destroy him. His own choices were enough. The meeting continued for hours. Every major decision was reviewed. Every shortcut, every assumption, every warning that had been ignored. Then one document appeared on the screen. Marcus recognized it immediately. A recommendation report from months earlier. His own signature was at the bottom. The report had warned about potential problems with the expansion. Marcus remembered seeing it. He remembered dismissing parts of it. He remembered saying they needed confidence, not hesitation. Now the board was asking why he ignored professional advice. Marcus looked around the room. Nobody was attacking him. Nobody was humiliating him. They were simply asking him to answer. That was harder, because he had spent years believing success meant never being questioned. Elena watched him carefully. Not with satisfaction. With disappointment that hurt more. After the meeting ended, Marcus stayed behind. Everyone left except Elena. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You knew," Marcus finally said. Elena looked at him. "Knew what? That this would happen." She was quiet. "I knew there would eventually be consequences." Marcus laughed softly. "Consequences?" He shook his head. "You make it sound so simple. It is simple." His expression changed. "No, it isn't." Elena waited. Marcus looked frustrated. "I built this company. You helped build it." The correction was gentle, but it mattered. "You had talent," Elena continued. "You worked hard. You earned opportunities. But you also started believing you were the only reason those opportunities existed." Marcus looked away. Because that was exactly what happened. Success had slowly changed the way he saw people. Especially her. "You could have stopped me," he said. Elena's expression hardened slightly. "I tried." The answer surprised him. "When?" "Many times." She walked toward the table and picked up one of the reports. "I asked questions. I pointed out risks. I suggested slowing down." Marcus remembered, but his memory was different. He remembered her concerns as criticism. He remembered feeling annoyed. He remembered thinking she did not understand pressure. "You never respected my opinion," Elena said. Marcus had no response, because he knew she was right. The silence between them carried years of things neither of them had said. Then Elena placed the report down. "I am not doing this because I want you to suffer." Marcus looked at her. "Then why?" "Because the company has employees, investors, and partners who deserve responsible leadership." That answer reminded him of something. Elena had always thought beyond herself. Even now, even after everything, she was protecting people, not punishing him. That realization made the loss feel heavier. Meanwhile, outside the company, rumors started spreading. Not about Elena, about Marcus. People who once praised his business instincts began questioning his decisions. The same executives who had celebrated his aggressive strategy now quietly distanced themselves. Victoria noticed the change immediately. At first, she tried to stay close. She told Marcus they would handle it. She said every successful person faced setbacks. But Marcus noticed something. She no longer talked about the future. She no longer discussed long-term plans. She only talked about protecting herself. One evening, Marcus confronted her. You knew more than you told me. Victoria looked annoyed. Not again. You knew Elena had influence. I knew she came from a powerful family. Marcus stared at her. You said she was irrelevant. Victoria's silence answered. Marcus felt something break inside, because suddenly he understood. Victoria had not just chosen him because she believed in him. She had chosen the version of him she thought would rise higher, and now that version was disappearing. You saw me as an opportunity, Marcus said. Victoria looked away. Don't make this dramatic. That sentence told him everything. The woman he thought understood his ambition had never understood him. She understood his status, his potential, his usefulness, but not him. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment. The divorce papers were still somewhere in his office, the same papers he had once signed with confidence. He remembered the way he looked at Elena that day, like he was doing her a favor. Like leaving her was proof that he had outgrown her. Now he wondered if he had been walking away from the only person who truly saw him. The next morning, another announcement reached the executive team. The investment group had decided to pause several expansion plans. Not permanently, not as punishment, after review. Marcus knew what that meant. His choices had consequences. The company would survive. But his position was changing. He arrived at his office and found his assistant waiting. She looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hale, there's something you need to see. She handed him a folder. Inside were internal reports, not about the company, about him. Performance reviews, decision assessments, leadership concerns. Marcus turned through the pages, slowly. At the end was a final note, a recommendation from the board. He read it twice, then a third time, because the words he saw were not about money, not about failure, not about losing power. They were about trust. The final sentence was simple. The board must determine whether Marcus Hale is still capable of leading under the standards expected by the investment group. Marcus lowered the folder. For the first time, he understood the truth. He had spent years believing Elena needed him. Now he was facing the possibility that he was the one who had depended on her all along, and then his phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he never expected to see. Elena's attorney. Marcus answered slowly. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm. Mr. Hale, there is one matter regarding your divorce agreement that requires your immediate attention. Marcus felt his chest tighten. What matter? A pause followed. Then the attorney said, the financial disclosures you received during the divorce process were incomplete. Marcus went silent, because he suddenly realized something. The divorce he thought he controlled was never the situation he believed it was. Marcus did not sleep after the call from Elena's attorney. The phrase kept repeating in his mind. The financial disclosures were incomplete. At first, he thought it was some legal technicality, something minor. A correction in paperwork, a detail that would disappear after a few conversations. But deep down, Marcus knew better. Nothing connected to Elena was ever as simple as it appeared. The next morning, he arrived at the law office earlier than scheduled. For the first time in years, he was not walking into a room expecting people to impress him. He was walking in expecting answers. His own attorney was already there. Across from them sat Elena's legal representative, along with several financial documents neatly arranged on the table. Marcus noticed something immediately. Elena was not there. That bothered him. He had spent weeks thinking she was trying to control the situation. Now he wondered if she had already stepped away because she trusted the process more than she trusted him. Mr. Hale, the attorney began, before we discuss revisions to the divorce agreement, there is something you need to understand. Marcus leaned back. What? The assets and financial interests connected to your marriage were never fully visible to you. He frowned. My wife and I shared everything. The attorney looked at him carefully. You believe that? The words landed harder than Marcus expected. A folder was placed in front of him. Inside were corporate structures, ownership documents, and investment records. Nothing looked familiar. Not because the information was hidden illegally, because Marcus had never thought to look. He had assumed Elena's quiet lifestyle meant she had no interest in business. He had mistaken silence for weakness. As he turned the pages, he noticed a pattern. Several investment entities were connected through different names, different companies, different legal structures. but the same underlying network. Marcus looked up. Who owns these? The attorney did not answer immediately. That information is part of the reason we are here. Marcus felt his frustration rising. I'm not interested in games. This is not a game. The attorney's voice remained calm. This is about making sure you understand the position you are actually in. Marcus looked back at the documents. For years, he had believed he was the financially responsible one in the marriage. He had believed he was the person carrying their future. Now he was sitting in a room discovering that the woman he called ordinary had been connected to a financial world he barely understood. But there was still one thing he could not accept. If she had all this power, why didn't she tell me? Nobody answered immediately. Because the answer was more painful than complicated. Elena had not hidden herself because she wanted to deceive him. She had hidden because she wanted to know whether he would value her with knowing. And Marcus had given her the answer. The attorney finally spoke. Mrs. Hale wanted a marriage where she was respected as a person, not as an asset. Marcus looked down. The sentence stayed with him, because he remembered every moment he had measured people. Every time he had judged someone by their career, their income, their connections. Especially Elena. The woman who had cooked meals after his late nights. The woman who had listened to his frustrations. The woman who had quietly encouraged him when nobody else believed in him. He had mistaken her support for dependence. He had mistaken kindness for lack of ambition. Meanwhile, the corporate review continued. The board did not remove Marcus immediately. They did something worse. They investigated. Every major decision from his leadership period was examined. Every contract, every expansion, every partnership. A formal audit began. And unlike Marcus' previous meetings, nobody was interested in protecting his image. They wanted facts. At the company headquarters, employees noticed the change. The confident executive who once walked through the building like nothing could challenge him now moved differently. He listened more. He asked more questions, but the damage had already started. People remembered the way Marcus treated others when he believed he was untouchable. The assistant who had been ignored. The analysts whose warnings were dismissed. The employees who watched him take credit while avoiding responsibility. Power had revealed parts of him he never wanted to see. Elena, meanwhile, remained focused on the audit. She did not celebrate Marcus's struggles. She did not spread rumors. She did not use her position to embarrass him. That confused him more than anything. Because Marcus had expected revenge. He had prepared himself to hate her. But Elena was not trying to hurt him. She was simply refusing to protect him anymore. That was the difference. One afternoon, Marcus saw her leaving a meeting with the audit team. He followed her into the hallway. Elena, she stopped, not because she was afraid, because she chose to. I need to ask you something. She waited. Did you know everything? Her expression changed slightly. About what? About Victoria, about my decisions, about the company. Elena looked at him for a long moment. I knew enough. Marcus swallowed. You knew she was using me? I knew she saw your ambition before she saw your caricature. The honesty hurt. Because it was exactly what he had done to Elena. He had seen her position, or rather what he thought was her lack of position. He had never really seen her. I should have told you, Elena said quietly. Marcus looked surprised. That's the first time you've admitted that. Yes, she did not avoid responsibility, but you should also ask yourself why you never noticed. Marcus had no answer, because the truth was uncomfortable. He had not been fooled by an elaborate disguise. He had been blinded by his own assumptions. He had created a version of Elena in his mind, and then punished her for not being the person he imagined. I thought you were holding me back, he admitted. Elena's face softened, but only slightly. I know. I thought you didn't understand my world. You were right about one thing. Marcus looked at her. I didn't understand your world. The words were quiet, but they carried years of distance. That night, Marcus returned home and opened the divorce documents again. This time he read them differently. Before, he had looked at them as proof that he was moving forward. Now he saw something else, a moment where he had been given a choice. And he had chosen pride. His phone buzzed. Another message from the company. A board meeting had been scheduled. The subject line was short. Leadership review. Marcus stared at the screen. He knew what it meant. This was no longer about the divorce, no longer about Elena. This was about whether he still had a place in the empire he thought he had built. The next morning, he entered the boardroom. The atmosphere was colder than before. The chairman placed a document in front of him. Marcus, after completing the initial audit, we found several issues that require formal action. Marcus opened the file. Page after page showed decisions he had approved, mistakes he had defended, warnings he had ignored. Then he reached the final section, a list of financial sources behind the company's growth. His eyes moved down the page, then stopped, because for the first time he saw the name connected to the investment group, a name he had heard before, a name everyone else in the room respected, a name he had never associated with Elena. The chairman looked at him. "Before we continue, there is something you should know." Marcus slowly raised his eyes. "What?" The chairman took a breath. The person who has been funding this company's growth was never just an outside investor. A silence filled the room. Then the chairman said, "She has been the controlling force behind it from the beginning." Marcus sat in the empty conference room long after everyone else had left. The board members had given him time to process the information, but they had not given him comfort. For years, Marcus had believed he understood power. He thought power came from being the person with the biggest title in the room, the person who spoke the loudest, the person everyone needed. But now he understood something he had never considered. Real power did not always announce itself. Sometimes it sat quietly across from you every morning. Sometimes it asked how your day was. Sometimes it reminded you to eat before another late meeting. And sometimes you ignored it because you had already decided that person was beneath you. The next few days were difficult. Marcus's position inside the company changed. He was not fired, not immediately. The board chose a more careful approach. They placed restrictions on his authority while the audit continued. Every major decision required additional approval. Every contract was reviewed. Every recommendation he made was questioned. For someone like Marcus, the loss of trust was worse than the loss of a title. He had built his identity around being respected. Now he had to face the fact that many people had only respected his position, not necessarily him. Victoria noticed the shift quickly. At first, she tried to stay close. She called Marcus every evening. She told him not to worry. She reminded him that powerful people always face challenges. But Marcus noticed something different. She was no longer talking about their future. She was talking about protecting herself. When investors began asking questions, Victoria became harder to reach. When Marcus needed support, she suddenly had meetings. When he needed someone to tell him the truth, she gave him reassurance instead. He finally understood what Elena had known. Victoria had not fallen in love with him. She had fallen in love with the version of Marcus who seemed unstoppable. One evening, Marcus met Victoria at a quiet restaurant downtown. He watched her carefully across the table. "You knew more than you told me," he said. Victoria looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, this isn't the time to blame each other. That's exactly what you would have said if I was still useful." Her expression hardened. "You're being unfair." He almost laughed. The irony was impossible to miss. A few months earlier, he had used the same words whenever Elena questioned him. Unfair, dramatic, overreacting. He had dismissed his wife's feelings because they interrupted the story he wanted to believe. Now he was experiencing what it felt like to be dismissed. Victoria leaned closer. "You need to think strategically. This situation can still be managed." Marcus studied her. "Managed by who?" She did not answer. That silence told him everything. The relationship ended there. Not with a dramatic scene, not with anger. Just a quiet realization that the person beside him had disappeared the moment he stopped looking successful. Meanwhile, Elena continued overseeing the internal review. She remained professional. That was what confused Marcus the most. He expected anger from her. He expected satisfaction. Instead, she treated him with the same calm professionalism she gave everyone else. When they finally met privately, it was not in a courtroom or a boardroom. It was in a small office away from the company floor. No assistants, no executives, just the two of them. Marcus arrived early. For once, he did not want control over the conversation. He wanted to understand. Elena entered a few minutes later. She looked exactly as she always had. Simple, composed, uninterested in proving anything. That was the part that hurt him, 'cause he remembered how many times he had mistaken that calmness for weakness. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said. Elena sat down but did not respond immediately. He continued. "I spent years thinking I was the one carrying us." "You were carrying something," she said softly. Marcus looked at her. "What does that mean?" "You were carrying your own expectations." The answer was painful because it was true. Marcus lowered his eyes. "I thought I needed someone who matched my ambition." Elena's expression remained calm. "And you thought I didn't?" "Yes." The honesty surprised even him. "I thought you were comfortable being invisible." Elena looked away for a moment. "I was never invisible, Marcus." Her voice was quiet. "You just weren't looking." That sentence stayed between them. Because it explained everything. The marriage had not failed because Elena lacked value. It failed because Marcus only valued what he could measure: a salary, a title, a network, a public image. He had never considered that loyalty, patience, and character were also forms of strength. "I should have told you the truth," Elena said. Marcus looked up. "Why didn't you?" She took a moment before answering. "Because I wanted to know if you would love me without needing a reason." Marcus felt his chest tighten. And Elena did not need to answer. He already knew. "I failed." She did not disagree, but she also did not attack him. That hurt more. "I don't think you are a bad person," Elena said. Marcus looked surprised. "You'd? Don't." "No." She paused. "I think you became someone who only recognized value after losing access to." The words were difficult to hear. But for the first time, Marcus did not argue. He listened. That was something he had rarely done during their marriage. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. They discussed the divorce, the remaining legal steps, the separation of their lives. Elena made it clear that she was not interested in destroying him. She wanted fairness, nothing more. "I thought you would try to ruin me," Marcus admitted. Elena looked at him. "Why would I?" "Because of what I did." She was quiet. Then she said, "What you did hurt me. But becoming cruel would only mean I let your choices change who I am." Marcus had no response. For the first time, he saw the difference between strength and revenge. Strength did not need to punish everyone around it. After the meeting, Marcus walked out of the building alone. The city felt different. The same streets, the same buildings, but he felt like he was seeing them for the first time. He had spent years chasing a future where everyone would recognize him, and he had ignored the person who had recognized him before anyone else. His phone rang as he reached his car. It was his attorney, Marcus answered. "There's been a development," the attorney said. Marcus stopped. "What happened?" "The audit team found something connected to the company's earlier expansion." Marcus waited. "There is evidence that several decisions you approved created significant financial exposure." His stomach tightened. "How significant?" A pause. "Significant enough that the board is considering removing you completely." Marcus closed his eyes. He had expected consequences, but hearing the words made them real. Then his attorney added one more sentence. "And there is another issue." Marcus opened his eyes. "What issue?" "The board wants Elena present at the final review meeting." His grip tightened around the phone. "Why?" The attorney hesitated. "Because she was not just the investor behind the company." A silence followed. "She was the person who approved every major move." Marcus stood frozen beside his car. The woman he thought had been standing behind him all these years had actually been the one holding everything together. And tomorrow he would have to sit across from her while the entire company learned exactly who she had been all along. Marcus arrived at the final review meeting earlier than anyone else. For once, he did not walk into the boardroom with confidence. He walked in, carrying the weight of every assumption he had made. The room was different from before. The people sitting around the table were not waiting for him to present a strategy. They were waiting for him to answer for one. Marcus looked at the empty chair at the end of the table, the chair reserved for Elena. For years, he had never wondered why she was not sitting there. Now he could not understand how he had missed it. The doors opened. Elena entered quietly. No dramatic entrance, no attempt to make anyone uncomfortable. She simply walked in, greeted the board members, and took her seat. Marcus watched the reactions around the room. Everyone respected her, not because they feared her, because they trusted her. That difference bothered him. He'd spent years trying to create authority. Elena had built it without demanding attention. The chairman began the meeting. As everyone knows, the audit has revealed several areas requiring correction. Today's discussion is not about punishment. It is about accountability and the future direction of the company. Marcus listened silently. The words were professional, controlled, but he understood what they meant. His choices had consequences. The first report was presented. Several investments had been rushed. Some partnerships had been approved despite internal concerns. Some executives had warned him about risks, but he had prioritized speed and appearances. Marcus remembered those meetings. He remembered brushing aside questions. He remembered believing that hesitation was a weakness. Now those same decisions were written on paper, not as achievements, as problems. Elena, one board member said, turning toward her, "Do you want to add anything?" Marcus looked at her. This was the moment he expected. He expected her to reveal everything, to tell the room how she had been underestimated, to remind everyone that she had warned him. Instead, Elena simply said, "The goal is not to revisit every mistake. The goal is to make sure we learn from them." Marcus looked down. Even now, she was not trying to humiliate him. That was harder to accept than anger, because anger would have allowed him to blame her. Calmness forced him to face himself. After the meeting, Marcus stayed behind. He waited until everyone had left. Elena was gathering her documents when he spoke. "Why?" She looked up. "Why? What? Why did you keep protecting me?" Elena paused. Marcus continued. "You could have exposed me months ago." She placed the papers down. "I wasn't protecting you." The answer surprised him. "Then what were you doing?" "Giving you the opportunity to take responsibility without being forced." Marcus looked away. He knew what she meant. She had not destroyed him because she wanted to see whether he would recognize his own mistakes, and he had failed that test. "I thought you wanted me to fail," he admitted. Elena shook her head. "No. Then what did you want?" Her expression softened slightly. "I wanted you to understand that the person you looked down on was the same person who believed in you when nobody else did." The words hit him harder than any accusation. Because they were true, before the money, before the company, before the success. Elena had been there, and he had rewarded that loyalty by making her feel insignificant. "I was embarrassed by you," Marcus said quietly. Elena did not react. "I know. I thought you made me look smaller." She looked at him. "You were afraid people would judge you because of me." Marcus swallowed. "Yes, and you never considered that I might have been the one choosing to stand beside you." That sentence stayed with him, because it changed everything. He had always believed Elena was lucky to have him. He had never considered that she had chosen him, not because of his money, not because of his career, because of who he was before he became obsessed with proving himself. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. It was the first time he said it without expecting forgiveness. Elena noticed. That mattered, but it did not erase the past. "I believe you are sorry," she said. Marcus looked hopeful for a moment. Then she continued, "But being sorry does not rebuild trust." His expression fell slightly. "I know." That answer surprised her, because the old Marcus would have argued. He would have explained. He would have searched for a way to make himself the victim. This time, he accepted it. The divorce process continued. The financial settlement was finalized according to the agreements already established. Elena did not demand additional compensation. She did not use her influence to take control of Marcus's personal assets. She simply separated what belonged to her from what belonged to him. That was what made it difficult for Marcus. She had every reason to hurt him, but she chose boundaries instead. The company consequences were also clear. The board decided Marcus would step away from executive authority. He would remain involved in a limited advisory role while the transition continued. It was not the dramatic collapse he feared. It was something more difficult. He had to live with the results of his actions. He had to rebuild without pretending he had been wronged. Weeks passed. Marcus changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. He started listening to employees he had once ignored. He apologized to people he had dismissed. He stopped blaming circumstances for every problem. Some people accepted his apologies. Some did not. He learned that forgiveness was not something he could demand. It was something others had the right to choose. Elena noticed the changes from a distance. She did not return to the marriage. She did not become his friend immediately, but she saw that he was finally becoming honest with himself. One evening, Marcus requested one final conversation before the divorce was officially completed. They met at a quiet cafe away from the company, not as executives, not as enemies, just two people who had shared years together. "I used to think losing you would be the worst thing that could happen," Marcus said. Elena listened. "And now?" He looked down. "Now I think the worst thing was having you and not knowing your value." Elena was silent, because that was the truth she had wanted him to understand from the beginning. Not that she was wealthy, not that she had power, that she was worthy of respect even if she had nothing to prove. Marcus took a breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me. That is honest. I just want you to know I finally understand." Elena nodded. "That matters." But her voice remained steady. "Understanding does not mean going back." Marcus looked at her. For the first time, he accepted that. He had spent years believing love meant being chosen no matter what he did. Now he understood that real love also required responsibility. As they prepared to leave, Elena received a message on her phone. She glanced at it briefly. Her expression changed. Not with fear, with focus. Marcus noticed. "What is it?" Elena locked the screen. "A company matter," he almost smiled. "A company matter." The same words she had used for years. Words he once thought were meaningless, now he knew better. As they stepped outside, Marcus watched her walk away. He no longer saw the quiet wife who stayed in the background. He saw the person who had been holding the entire foundation together. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office and found an unexpected message waiting. It was from the board. A new leadership decision had been made. The subject line contained only 4 words: "The owner will speak." Marcus opened the message. His face changed as he read the final sentence. Elena was not attending the meeting as an investor. She was attending as the person with final authority over the company's future, and this time everyone would know it. Months after the divorce was finalized, Marcus Hale no longer recognized the man he used to be. The change did not happen all at once. There was no single moment where everything suddenly became clear. It happened slowly, in quiet meetings, in difficult conversations, in the moments when he had to admit he was wrong without expecting anyone to comfort him. For the first time in his life, Marcus was rebuilding without a title protecting him. He no longer walked into rooms expecting people to follow. He listened. He learned. He started working with smaller companies that needed honest leadership rather than impressive appearances. Some people questioned whether he could recover. Some believed his reputation was permanently damaged. Marcus understood why. He had spent years believing success erased mistakes. Now he knew better. A career could be rebuilt. A reputation could be repaired. But trust had to be earned one decision at a time. He also stopped trying to rewrite what happened with Elena. In the past, he would have searched for excuses. He would have said he was pressured. He would have blamed ambition. He would have explained why his choices made sense at the time. Now he simply admitted the truth. He had hurt someone who had loved him. Not because she lacked value, because he failed to see it. Elena's life moved forward in a completely different direction. The investment group she secretly controlled continued growing under her leadership. The same people who once underestimated her now sought her advice. Executives who had never heard her name before learned that many of the company's strongest decisions had come from her careful planning. But Elena never changed the way she carried herself. She still avoided unnecessary attention. She still preferred results over recognition. The difference was that now, she no longer hid herself to make others comfortable. She led openly. Not as someone trying to prove she was powerful, as someone who finally accepted that she always had been. The world eventually learned the truth about Elena. Not through rumors, not through a dramatic announcement, through business records, leadership decisions, and the people who had worked with her for years. The hidden heiress, who had been mistaken for an ordinary wife, was finally recognized for what she had always been. A leader, an owner, a person whose value existed long before anyone knew her wealth. Marcus saw the announcement from his office. He stared at the article for several minutes. The headline mentioned Elena's leadership, the company's growth, and the future direction of the investment group. But the words that stayed with him were not about money. They were about trust, about judgment, about the kind of leader Elena had become. He realized something that took him far too long to understand. He had spent years trying to become impressive enough to deserve respect. Elena had spent years giving respect before anyone knew she had power. That was the difference between them. Their lives became separate, not because of hatred, because some relationships ended when people finally saw the truth. Elena built a life where she no longer had to shrink herself. Marcus built a life where he no longer needed to pretend he was bigger than everyone else. They occasionally crossed paths through business. When they did, there was no anger, no bitterness, just distance and mutual understanding. One afternoon, they met briefly after a company event. Marcus looked healthier, calmer, different. "I heard about your new project," Elena said. He smiled. "It's smaller than what I used to do. That's not always a bad thing." He nodded. "I know." There was a pause. Then Marcus said something he had never been able to say before. "I'm glad you didn't let me destroy who you were." Elena looked at him. "You never had that much power." The answer was simple, but it carried something important. Marcus smiled slightly. "That's true." For a moment, they stood there as two people who had once known each other deeply and then lost their way. "I hope you're happy," Marcus said. Elena believed he meant it, not because he wanted something from her, not because he hoped for another chance, because he had finally learned to care without expecting a reward. "I am," she answered, and she was. Not because she had won, not because Marcus had lost. Because she had stopped measuring her worth through someone else's opinion. The divorce had not been the end of Elena's story. It had been the moment she stopped carrying a relationship that required her to stay invisible. Marcus eventually understood the truth. The greatest thing he lost was never money. It was the person who believed in him before success made him arrogant. It was the chance to love someone without needing to compare value. It was the opportunity to be chosen by someone who never needed anything from him. Years later, when Marcus looked back, he no longer wondered how Ahia had hidden her identity. He understood the real question. Why had he needed her identity to change the way he treated her? That was the part he regretted most. Elena had not become valuable after the reveal. She had been valuable all along. Some people lose everything because they spend their lives chasing more and forget what they already have. Others walk away from what hurts them, protect their dignity, and finally become who they were always meant to be. What would you have done if you were in Elena's place? Share your thoughts in the comments.